It has been a hot minute since I've done a graphic design tutorial, and that seems to be something that you guys really like. So today I'm gonna go over something actually pretty basic, which is taking the color of something like a t-shirt and changing it from one color to any color you want. So let's get right into it. So for this first one, it's actually going to be using the best case scenario. And what I mean by that is you have a product or an item that is completely separated and isolated from its background, meaning that this is a plain white t-shirt on a very dark background. So it was easy for me to cut this out and not have to use my pen tool. But sometimes you do have to do that, which you will see in the next one. But this is a great situation, and also it's white, which I prefer for my color editing because it allows me to better change it to any color, including white, and it's already in white because sometimes it can be hard to change to white. So without boring you too much more with those kind of details, we're going to get right into it. So right off the bat, I'm going to duplicate this once, this first layer that I called white tee, and I will leave this first one alone because I like to have a backup of some cutout in case I mess anything up. So I have this one. I'm gonna name this one highlights, if I could spell. And then the first thing I'm gonna do is make sure that this is completely desaturated, and you'll see why. Now this may already be that way, but just in case, I'm going to hit Control U, or if you're on Mac, it's Command U. It'll pull up the hue saturation sliders for this layer. Now what I'll do is just crank that saturation all the way to the bottom, so it should be just black and white colors, and hit OK. Once you've done that, duplicate it and change this one to shadows. Now again, you'll see why I'm doing this. Now the shadows one I'm gonna leave alone, so I'll just change it to multiply and hide it. Click on highlights. Now the next thing we'll do is go down here to the bottom to your adjustments, and I'm going to click curves, and then right click, create clipping mask. And what that does is it groups it down. A quick way you could do that would be to do Control Alt G, or if you're on Mac, Command Alt G, but right clicking it is probably an easy way. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make it as dark as possible so that only the brightest of the highlights is only barely bright. So we're going to take the curves point that's all the way at the top of the highlights, and we're going to bring it all the way down till it's almost black. You can still see some definition, but we want there to be more definition. So I'm going to create a point anywhere around here on the shadows and just drag it all the way here. Maybe slide this down a little bit longer. And it's almost black, and that's intentional because when I set this to screen, we don't want it to be super bright on the color. We only want it to be a little bit. And then what I'll do is I will click, I'm good with that. So I'll click the curves, Control click the layer below it, and merge them. And the easy way to do that is Control E or Command E. And boom, now it's just that. So I'm going to set that to be called highlights and set it to screen. Now we're going to start adding our colors. So I'll hide that, and the first color I'm going to do just for fun, I'm going to do a pink color, which you can go back down to your adjustments, hit solid color, and let's do this. Very, very pink. I like to clean up my files as I go, so you'll notice I'm changing names a lot. It's just good to have good file management, and I'll always mention that, so if you can have good file management, do it. So I'm going to change this to be called pink, and I don't need this layer mask for this layer, so I'm just going to leave it. The reason why you want a solid color is I can't move it. If I move around anything else, it just stays in place. Now that's a little too much pink. We want it to be in the shape. So what we're going to do, first we're going to go down and create a new folder, a new group, highlight our layers that we want, and we're going to move it into this folder. Now we're going to Control click or Command click one of the cutouts because it's relatively the shape we want. And you'll notice there's the marching ants on it right now. That's the shape we want. And then we'll go right next to adjustments. There should be a button for add a layer mask. But if not, you can right click, And there might be a function for it. See, I'm so used to using shortcuts, so sometimes you'll see me do this. But this should be here by default, so you'll want to do add layer mask, and boom, you have the shape. Now, it's still not realistic, and you'll see why. So now, you'll see why we have these two layers. So I've got shadows, which is good, and then highlights, which is also good. Now, this isn't the exact color of, this may not be your exact color, so what you can do to tweak that is either by changing the pink itself, or you can change around what you do with the shadows. So like in this case, I don't think the shadows are quite realistic enough because the original was a little bit darker. So what I'll do is I will duplicate my shadows, which the way I do that is Control J, and now it's got more depth. I actually kind of like that. So we're just going to call this shadows more. Again, naming is everything. And you can even color coordinate stuff. And I'm going to put that base layer in here too. And then when I'm done, let's just say I'm happy with that. I'm going to save by doing Command S to save the current document. Close the folder so that, let's say I'm done with this, but I need to go back and edit it, or I'm going to be sharing it with y'all. It's cleaned up. It's hard to miss. But yeah, that's the simplest way to do that. And you can really change that to any color. So let's say you don't care about keeping this pink. You can just double click on the layer for the solid color and you can just move it around. And yeah, oh wow, that's a cool orange. And of course, depending on your saturation, you can even do black. Of course, it's hard to see on this background, but it is there. You can stick with white. You can relatively do whatever color you want. Okay, so now I have a second example. Again, I will provide the links below to where I got these and attribute the authors who made these two awesome images, as well as provide you guys with the Photoshop files of these two projects. Now, you can see I've already kind of done some tweaking. Again, you would want to, in this case, pen tool to not only isolate him from the background, the person from the background, but you would also want to isolate the head. If you'll notice, I've already done this, and I hide my base layer, you'd see that his head is missing. It's just the hoodie, and that's easy enough for me. It may not be my cleanest cut when you look at it, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'd rather just have something good for y'all. We'll turn this back on. You'll notice I have the cutout in a folder already, so I can delete this layer mask because I don't think I'll be changing it. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with the t-shirt, but you'll see how it's a little bit different because this is a color instead of it being white. So I'm going to duplicate it once, hide the old one, call this one highlights. There's no real rhyme or reason why I put highlights under shadows, by the way. That's just what I do and what I'm used to, but you can do it the other way around. And again, we're going to pull up hue saturation, so Control or Command U, slide it all the way down. Now, one thing that I will note is that this can be a little bit difficult if the image you're working with is not high quality or if the entire subject is not in focus. So let's say you're taking a dope photo and you've got, you know, your aperture on your camera set to like 1.4. You might get some of the edges blurry, and that makes your pen tool job a little bit harder. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this kind of stylization. It's probably easier for you to mess around with that. Now, here's something I noticed when I didn't do my cutout, is his neck is orange. And a lot of times with any skin tone, usually in the right studio lighting, a bright garment is going to change the color of what's closest to it. So we'll edit that afterwards, but we're going to focus on the hoodie for now. So now that I have that, I'm going to duplicate it. All this one shadows. Now, this time we actually have to do something and create the shadows to make this white to make it work. So we're going to do kind of the opposite of what we did before with the shadows, or sorry, with the highlights. So for the shadows, we create our curves layer and group it down. And now we're going to take the highlight one, instead of going down for this one, we're going to go all the way across. And you can see in this spectrogram, I think that's what it's called, you can kind of see little spikes. That lets you know where a lot of the color and lighting is concentrated. So you'll notice, like, if I go too far, you lose all that shadow, which we don't want that, because this is the shadows layer. And this is actually pretty good about right here. But just to be sure, I'm gonna make another point and just kind of brighten it up just a little bit more. Because if we were doing pure white, I'd be okay with that. But now I'm happy with it. So we'll merge it. We'll go back, do highlights again. So you'll open up a curves layer, group it down. You're gonna take your highlight point and drive it all the way almost down. Create another point in the curve. You don't want it to be pure black, just like you don't want the other one to be pure white. So maybe right about here, yeah. Merge that, set that to screen. This one, I forgot to set to multiply, boom. Now, we'll make another solid color. So let's do, solid color. We'll do this pink again. And that's not too bad, honestly. Again, probably throw another shadow on there and boom, that looks more realistic. Now, we're not quite done with this one. And I actually, honestly, didn't anticipate this when I grabbed this image, but this is a good learning experience for everybody. So what do I do about this orange? Like I said, my cutout's not the best, don't judge me, but let's say that, you know, zoomed out, everything looks fine, except why is his neck orange? Now, I'm gonna close my hoodie layer, because I'm happy with that. I'm gonna open my base back up, because this is where I'm gonna make adjustments to things other than the hoodie, and I wanna clean up my file organization so it's not just all over the place. So I'm gonna make a new layer, set this to color. I'm gonna name this skin color. And this is not an exact science, but I like to do it this way. So what I'm gonna do is use your eyedropper tool, which you can hit I for, or it should be on your menu bar. I'm gonna find not a super light or super dark color, maybe about here. We're gonna get our brush, which we're gonna go here, or press B. Open this properties, make sure the hardness is on 0, and then we want to drive the opacity down to maybe about 50. Zoom in a little bit more. And you can increase your size by using your brackets, or you can just type in the size, but I use brackets because it's a little quicker. And I'll just start painting. Now you'll notice, like I said, now the color is not right with his skin, but we're gonna fix that in a sec. So first I'm going to brush the areas that look like they have the most orange, like here, and then it's not as noticeable anywhere else zoomed out, so let's zoom out and check. And that's not bad, but again, not quite his skin tone. Maybe let's do a little bit more here. And then if you're unsure with how the color matches up, you could always, kind of like we did with the hue saturation slider for the taking down the white, taking down the color to white, what we'll do is we'll have hit the skin color layer we just created selected, do Control or Command U, and then you can take your hue slider and maybe move that around a little bit. I don't want to change it too much, maybe desaturate it a little bit. This one is an eyeball thing, so I can't give you the exact, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And that's not too bad. A little less noticeable. And there we go. Same thing, if I wanted to change this later, change it. Now you will need to work on some things like balancing the shadows based on the context. Like if he was outdoors, the shadows would probably be a little bit more harsh. And some colors may not be the right color. In this case, this color kind of complements the overall photo tone, so it's not as hard to just leave it as is and be okay with it. But I would probably do a little bit more tweaking if I was doing this as a final product. But just to show you guys how I do this, it's pretty easy. I'm gonna show you my last little bits of cleanup before we wrap this up. So again, I don't need the layer mask. I'm gonna delete it. Call it pink. Hoodie isolated, I'll keep that up there. Minimize it and save it. and boom. As we go further into 2021, I plan on doing a few more opinion pieces, a lot more graphic design, and some photo tutorials, and maybe even do some streaming for you guys on Twitch. If you want to keep up with my streaming, make sure you go to twitch.tv/KennonPearson and make sure to follow and hit the notification bell so that way you know when I'm going live. I'm still working out my schedule a little bit, and I do a mix of gaming and art and community things, so be sure to check it out. Also, you can see all my other socials down below in case you want to stay connected. I will be doing prints soon, as I just recently did a trip to Alaska, and I'm going to be putting some very beautiful stuff both on my Instagram, my Twitter, and on whatever I end up deciding to sell my prints on. So there's a lot coming up for y'all. But anyway, I've talked enough. I'll see you guys in the next video.